G'day everyone. I am Samara, Jade, Teresa, Sendek. I am a Gunai sister girl, also of Plancha Marina descent. I'm from the sunny Naram, or Melbourne, as most, I think they're called Pakeha here. Call them white fellas back home. Just before we kick off, I'd actually like to begin with a just short moment of thanks for the, excuse me, my phone slightly died. The Nagai Tara, on whose lands we are presently here today, and though it's a little bit late for the fact, I would like to cross their land with their elders' permission. So, who am I? What am I doing? I'm a writer, narrative designer, QA tech outside of Australia. I specialize in working with large and established IP. My biggest claim to fame is Game of Thrones. I've also worked on Lord of the Rings. And before coming to game dev, used to bootleg kombucha around the city, made it myself. And before that, I was a MMA fighter. Then I had a heart attack and came to game dev. So I've been featured in Hardwired Island, Gender Euphoria, so not quite in the digital game space, but close enough. I've worked with a lot of small scale indies, Ligara and Tower of Voices, a few others from as far as Britain to as near as my own garage. Before that, I was known for dialogue-driven microgames, and right now I'm working on G14 classified material. Now, you're probably thinking, I can't wait to hear about the world-building bit. I love building worlds. I hope my world has everything this talk is about. Nope. Probably not. The literal last thing I want to hear is exposition about how your psychic space wizards have microbiota that let them do weird things. Right next to that, a page-long technical description about how a single firearm works right before a last stand in a corridor. I like beginning with pithy phrases, and today starts with, what the fucks per minute is not an accurate measurement of good law. That's what eureka moments are for. If you need a famous face attached to it, and I cannot believe I'm using Churchill unironically, I'm always ready to learn, although I do not always like being taught. Wish I had a better picture of the guy than that, but work with what you got. Tell me you're a 2-bit dictator without telling me you're a 2-bit dictator, eh, windbag? Law is like learning. The more you exposit, the more you're teaching. The more you let someone fiddle with puzzle pieces in their own time, the more competent they feel. The more they learn. For you designers, that's flow state. For you armchair psychiatrists, that's self-actualization. And for you marketers, that's an enticement. I don't feel a thing about a witty line from Liam Neeson trying to educate his adopted son and us by proxy about his galaxy-spanning religion. A cis woman with PCOS and a transgender crush harvesting a virus mutates testicles for estrogen, though, that's what I feel something for. Likewise, I couldn't care about how vampires use clone blood as a cash crop or how Edgy McQueen explains how her guns work. Learning that some mages treat gunpowder like magical cocaine, though, give me some more of that. I want to know what is so necessary that I need to snort potassium nitrate to make the magic work. I want to know what is so necessary that I need to harvest mutated nuts to survive in this world. There we go. In generalist level and combat design, the paradigm is don't show, don't tell, do. You run, you jump, you cry, drop something heavy on your best mate and laugh. You're doing and you're learning. This action has consequence. This consequence is applied to this thing is either good or bad, or player gets a cookie in the face or a taser somewhere not nice for doing so. So show is a bit of a loose word, so we'll break it down a little bit. It doesn't just mean see. It means to hear, to smell, to taste, to touch, to emote, to be in medias res, to be in the moment. A great piece of lore delivered in Don't Do, Don't Tell Show is Doom 2016's prologue elevator ride, and you have 3 characters: fossil fuel magnate Samuel Hayden, the Doomslayer, and a functionary. 1 character exposits, and 2 are dead silent, and one of them is very literally dead. Our interest in their world was for the betterment of mankind, says Uncle Sam. Under the intercom is the dead functionary. The Doomslayer's knuckles burst under his armor, but it was worth the risk, I assure you. Doom smashes the intercom. The scene goes for about 20 seconds and it delivers the following lore. The facility head, probably the company at large, doesn't fully understand the risk involved with hell. Humanity is somewhat desperate to try doing a colonialism on the Christian afterlife, and Doom has faced hell before, and it informs his uncompromising stance on it. Local lad Nick Jones, player and Pentacle model, has a pretty good explanation for lore. Generalized world building. Mostly, everything the milieu needs to be a hyper-real space. Realer than real for people. What's the one fantasy universe you want to visit, in effect? In the player and the Pentacle, it mostly agrees with what I'm fanging out here. It's the cliff note for you to understand what's up. Occasionally, the fellow that picks up the transmedia entry, and usually not for the player, except for the IP librarians. The book also draws a line at deep lore and regular lore, the former being contextualizing info and the latter being cold facts. With regards to regular lore, that would be the Quenya language. You don't really need to understand what's going on in the world, but it's handy to have. Deep lore is the stuff that contextualizes what's going on. So, using Doom, the regular lore is the UAC is a mega corporation with a finger in every pie on Earth, and it's the company that decided to plunder hell. Deep lore is the insidious nature of hell and how it isn't just brute force that it operates by. So you put 2 and 2 together, and you have a tidy summary of why fossil fuel companies willingly engineer mass destruction in exchange for material power. Doom is an anti-capitalist game, and I will die in that bunker. Now, why we're having this talk is simple. The common mistake is Babu narrativists treat their fluff like a little red car. They built it, it's theirs, and the world must know how cool it is. Like any Babu, the enthusiasm is charming, but the toy car is falling apart. The glue isn't holding, the paint doesn't have primer, and the axles are rusting already, and it was supposed to have a 4th wheel. In plain talk, it's either neglected work or it's earnest work in the wrong places. Is Quenya fundamentally important to understand The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings? No. But it helps make the space feel lived in. Remember, you're engaging the senses. We're looking to make a lived-in space, arguably the first character of the fiction, and not just a prop for scenarios. That's what a MacGuffin's called. So let's put this into practice rather than me lore dump and not give you a chance to immerse. We are going to build a town and stuff it full of quests relevant to this town. A place that is practical to live in and people who have reason to be there. Now, genre doesn't have to matter here. I like using Jacques Derrida for this, like your worlds, your peoples, your internal songs, your logics. Genre itself is a trait. It's a building block, a genetic allele rather than a box. Resident Evil is a horror game and a detective game. I don't need to know how the T-virus works, only that it's a symptom of someone else's tomfoolery. Hades is a roguelike and a family drama, and a Greek comedy. Zagreus is desperate to get out of an abusive home, but is key to everyone else getting a happily ever after. So, with all that in mind, let's start basically. What does shelter look like in your biome? We live in a temperate zone, we have clay, we have gypsum, we have timber, we have granite. Great, you can build a modernish dwelling. But wait. The rain is boiling and most of the fauna is carnivorous. So now you need to ask, what does shelter look like now? You can't use a cave, the water is too hot. You can't use plaster, the rain will destroy it worse than the rain we already have. Can't risk thatching because a hole means a death either way. Architecture, yeah, good start. Can you pet anything? In this world, no. Because architecture changes based on weather. Materials change, airflow changes, down to the angles in the scaffolding. And it's a big part of why the Levant and Western Europe have completely different principles. So on these pictures here, you can see the sandstone on the far left hand. That's the right direction, I think. The far left-hand side is a structure you would find in the Middle East. It's made out of I believe that's sandstone. Don't quote me on that. And that's endemic to the area. If you have a look at where the roofing is, those the dome merlons on the top of the pillars there. That's that's all built to deflect sand. The wooden stilt structure from the Pacific. That's built to withstand earthquakes. That's also built to withstand, to stay off the ground in case of a monsoon or a flash flood. And that stone house over there, it's built to trap heat and keep it in, not flush it out. What works in one area doesn't work in another. So, comparing and contrasting two areas, let's have a look at alpine and tropical conditions. And I'm going to use the Köppen climate classifications. Alpine is part of Group E, the polar and alpine climates. Tropical climates are under Group A. Specifically, let's use tundra and rainforest climates. Assuming that there's roughly the same amount of timber, vegetation, fruits, and some game animals, habitation is possible. So a tropical rainforest will have about 60 millimeters of monthly rain. There's no dry seasons either. So firstly, your shelter has to be rainproof. Stone sounds like a good idea in theory. Until you factor in heat and humidity, you'll cook in your own home. By the by, has anyone checked in on our colonial despots in Britain today? Because baby, they be cooking. Local woods and sound engineering are better for this job. Water will also get everywhere, so food storage can't be on ground level. You have to keep it high. A tundra, by contrast, averages about 10 degrees Celsius at warmest, and usually below that. So in the hottest month, you have to account for melting snow, and the coldest causes routine hypothermia. You have to build to keep the heat in, not flush it out. Bogs are also far more common here than in a rainforest. You can store meats in the snow in the coldest month, and the same principles apply to chili bins and freezers, because that cold will melt. You have to figure out how to preserve it when it melts. I'm going to go with a rainforest, but you can keep going with a tundra if you like. So most devs are actually pretty on the ball with dwellings. They have shorthand reference to what these communities look like, what these spaces look like, and what these structures would be made of. So one of the best spaces I've seen for this boggy tundra environment is in Metro Exodus. The half-shrunken huts and houses in the Volga tell local vignettes with their contents and their placement. Unfortunately, this is the exception that proves the rule. It's the law that tends to drop the ball in most cases. These houses tend to all look the same and serve the same purpose, to house a family of 4 or 5 in a few comfortable rooms with a hearth and a communal area. And that's fine if that was what all this community was doing. However, in wider communities, there's a point where other buildings come in, like an apothecary's atelier or a hunter's cabin. There's always a matter of time and assets, and I'll counter. Rooms are prefabs. You weld those boxes together and you get a structure. Your grocer, your carpenter, your baker, even your local friendly local hobby store only change really in contents, not the structure. You ever notice how easily you can change a cafe into a bar? And it's exactly that. It's the same with the dwelling, whether it's made of wood or stone or plaster. Now keep in mind what it's used for and which character styles the room as what. So now we have a dwelling that accommodates a family group, and there's about 6 of them. They each bring specific skills to this community. You're in an environment and it informs how they live, and now we need to answer who they are. So breaking it down to the barest of bare six, you have a builder, a hunter, a forager, a healer, a crafter, and an administrator. We've just established that they have different needs and different contents in the structures, so what would be the contents? So we'll just do three in the interest of time. The builder, the forager, and the administrator. Crafter and hunter and healer have cross-pollination or similar traits to these three anyway. Each has relevant tools and roles within society. However, the magic circle is different for everyone. You step in and you should immediately know who you're talking to, even with that cross-pollination. What they do informs the way they think. You might have noticed this with your colleagues. Your artists might be a bit more visual. Your programmers might be a bit more logarithmic. Writers a bit more abstract. And producers might be a bit more people-oriented. If you've answered what the dwellings are made of, now we can answer what the builder's place looks like. There's saw blades, nails, hooks, meaty tack lines. Yes! Then we work with more organic materials like wood and bone. No, there are more chisels, trowels, and heavy hammers. Builder probably works more with stone. And since my society is in a rainforest, my builders and crafters are going to work more with wood. If you're working in a tundra, you might, if your environment is, say, a tundra, then you might be more interested in things like ice picks. What about foragers? So they're fruits like berries and pomes, and then this is someone who's in charge of food. Are there lots of herbs, oils, and flowers? They probably work hand in glove with the healer. Do they get timber or stone? They probably work with your crafters. So, what's the point? These people drive your quests. Answer these questions and quests come much easier. Evil maniacal laugh. All right, so once you've established this, you can make relevant content for your area. People drive stories. So let's just say that there's a werewolf in the area that's harassing the forager and the hunter can't deal with it. With the partner sponsor Forest Paths, cheeky little plug, we can fiddle with this setup. We can reverse the expectation. The hunter is the werewolf. Cliched, but works for a reason. Go for an escalation. The werewolf kills the hunter before turning on you. Applying a transformation, the werewolf is the hunter's ill-tempered lover come pet, or an intervention. The werewolf is the administrator of a rival town, which now gives us a reason to seek it out. From a lore perspective, transformation feels the most interesting. We learn more about how werewolves work, we get a sense of the people's attitude to them, the hunter doesn't want to kill his partner, said partner has a problem they're trying to manage, the forager cannot work because of this. The player could then ask, would the forager want something different knowing who the werewolf is? And you really want them asking questions like that instead of, well, that's cool. I want pancakes for tea. Now, we have a pertinent quest for your RPG. Now, there's a mission in your morally grey FPS. Now, there's a bonus objective in your turn-based strategy. So, my rainforest community, and so let's just sum up again. In my rainforest community, one of the villagers is a werewolf, and they're making life hard for the lumberjack. The hunter doesn't want to hurt their partner, but the lumberjack cannot work because of this. Sure, you could just kill the partner, job done, in a way, but your mechanics allow you to talk your way through. Maybe you can have an itinerant, maybe you have a, water down. Maybe you have a itinerant detective aesthetic for your mechanics too. So how can we make a solution fitting to the world and make it realer than real? Now bear with me, we're going for a planeswalk. For a time it was still helpful to wish for things, I saw a Tumblr post about a city that worships pigeons. The author wrote that the city was one of the most hygienic in the world, untouched by plague and major illness. It came down to pigeons. What had happened was someone commissioned great statues across the city and parks to go with it. People complained about the pigeon leavings, so the city got the homeless together and paid them to wash everything. Then when a plague hit and pigeons migrated to the city, people began thinking that pigeons were driving away the plague. The smarter people in the city cottoned on. Squalor wasn't a thing in this place because of the cleaners. And after that, the pigeon became the city's emblem, and after that, a local hero. And so came about the rule of not disturbing the pigeons. So, we have a permutation of culture and how it springs up. In anthropology, and just so I'm not accused of false advertising here, you see similar affectations. The Abrahamic god in the earliest traditions was a god of mountains. That distinction has melded over time with oral and written storytelling into the cranky old fellow we recognize today. Or if you're a Christian, the cranky lich with a dove that allegedly loves you but gives us a guy like St. Paul. Go figure. A more direct example of a god's interpretation turning over time is the Egyptian god Seta. In the earliest traditions, Seta was one of the chief protectors of Ra. He joined the bark to keep Apep, the great destroyer, away from the sun. However, once colonizers from Persia and Greece got in, this patron of foreigners, storms, and desert became demonized, particularly with the Greek conflation of Seta with the Titan Typhon. So now we see Seta as an evil force of nature rather than a heroic defender. Another fine job by colonialism. Events inform culture, and nothing comes ex nihilo. So in the case of the werewolf villager, you can freely answer this one. Are they considered monsters for eating the young? Did they attract a deity's attention? Do they live off fish and guide the lost home? Is this how puberty expresses in this world? That part is what you need to figure out when you're building your world docs. Not their diet, or if they're weak to silver or garlic, or running really fast across a beach at sunset. Skill Myths 101. Leave that for your quest writing, and after you've figured out your tone and your aesthetic pillars. What I want to know is if in... a little bit behind. What I want to know is if in this rainforest city, built into tree canopies to avoid boiling rain and hyper carnivores, populated by renowned woodworkers and chefs who worship pigeons, treats its werewolves well. Yes and no are the best non-answers you could give. With the player in the Pentacles star model, I want to know if the lore of the city and the deep lore of how werewolves work leads to a ritual killing event, just like Bloodborne. Or they live on the back of a giant space turtle and become city watch captains and shepherds, just like Discworld. With Forest Paths, I want to know how you can escalate that. I want to know how you can flip it all on its head. I want to know how you can recontextualize it into something else. That's what I need in your. That's what you need in your world-building Bibles, because from that you have quests, you have a hyperreal space, you have a relevant time and place that expresses itself. That's what you're communicating. I don't care that the UAC has figures in every pie on Earth, or why they call fossil fuels Argent energy, or even that they have a crack private army. What I care about is their sheer gumption to plunder Hell's resources while blaming their fuck-ups on demons. Likewise, I don't care to know how your devil-slaying protagonist gets his money for all of the designer coats he gets himself. I do care that all his wisecracks are to cover the trauma of watching his mother's murder. I don't care to know which factories or planets or designers produced a 20-foot-tall semi-sapient war machine. I do care when, in the middle of a galaxy-wide conflict, BT-7274 learns what a thumbs up means. For those who built a world that wasn't mine, a sprawling tundra Venice whose bone instruments are widely sought after, for example, What aesthetics are important to that world? What conditions gave rise to that people? Why do they value what they value? What will your players see and feel about this place? What do they take away when they enter this magic circle? That is the world building that I need to know. I need to know what's in the journals. I need to know what's on the maps. I need to know how they eat, why they worship. I need to know the causes of X event or Y outcome. I don't care how your Byzantine your politics structure is, or why your weird magic system, or how weird your magic systems are. Tell me why the law makes your game's life lesson important. With that werewolf in the rainforest, the lesson is simple. The harm you are capable of doing will affect someone else eventually, and it has to be dealt with. World building and lore are storytelling crafts. And because they're storytelling crafts, you must answer what someone is going to learn for the real world. You are the shamans of this society. You are the ones who must mediate these new experiences, these emotions, these ideas that people have, these flashes of divine inspiration. You must mediate them. And through your stories, tell people how best to move forward, why they should know these things. So stop handing in 5 out of 150 pages of usable material. Make every one of those 150 pages count. Thank you. Just very quickly, some further reading. Player in the Pentacle, Nick Jones. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful lad. I think recently moved to Sweden for Shark Mob. Alexander Swords for Forest Parts, also for sponsoring this. Stand up, Alexander, wherever you are, if you're here. Yep. Big round of applause for Alexander Swords. I didn't really have any discrete examples of writing for games by Hannah Nicklin. I literally just got it, but needed to throw it in anyway because it is a fucking banger. And Laura Genre by Jacques Derrida and A. Rennell. Very, very, very helpful for understanding just how flexible and malleable your game traits are. And you can basically just break it down a little more and experiment and see what works. Because that's how you get Cthulhu with the Tea Party. Questions?
Hello? Okay. So my question is that how do you find in lore what is best to find an explanation for, even if it never comes up, and when is it best to leave it for interpolation for the interpretation for the players to come up with their own theories of what could have happened in this one thing in the past?
I think the best answer for that is unreliable information. You know what? I'm actually going to hold myself to this. So Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Zero Dawn and Mass Effect did this a fair bit. Hunt Showdown also does this a lot. You have a lot of lore, especially codex entries that are biased. They're incomplete. They don't really understand the problem at hand. So especially with Hunt Showdown, it's told through journals. It's told basically as an investigator, like in the now times, and now coming over to like way back when in 1895, and just trying to make sense of this demonic incursion heralded by a zombie apocalypse. Like even the hunters don't know what's really going on. So you've got a lot of inference by way of like, oh, this is what's happening. The devil's come, and you've really got no indication that the devil's kind of a thing. You do know that you're probably dealing with like a plague of flies that will eventually turn people into zombies, but that's about the extent of what you can confirm. The rest of it is just, you know, going with your mates or going solo, go find the big squiggly demon, kill the big squiggly demon, steal a piece of its soul, and hope you don't get shot on the way back. And with regards to trailers, it's kind of in that same sense of like, don't do, don't tell, show. Like, what is it with Mass Effect's Normandy? You can kind of see it a little bit in the different design aesthetics of the different species ships. Is that with the Turians, it's very blocky, hard, angular. Like these are meant to be menacing ships. With the Asari, it's a lot more fluid and freeform and a little bit artsy. The humans are very utilitarian with their designs. And that's mostly what we see. Even with the Reapers, they look like cyborg cuttlefish, really. So that's what really gets us informed about that lore, that culture, that practicality. From that, we can basically reverse engineer and figure out what's important to this society. But then you have the codex entries that will just spell it out for people.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi. Can you expand a little bit on how the pigeons were related to the plague?
So, well, as I said, this is from a time it was still helpful to wish for things, or in plain English, once upon a time. I can't remember the full details of it, but so basically what had happened in this fantasy world, it's basically just by going by inference and a little bit of yes-anding, I think, on the author's part. It was basically going like, okay, the city has a weird rule about pigeons, and because there were no, like, people were being paid to clean up the squalor. So from that, there was no squalor in the city. And that's like, there was nothing really all that unhygienic about it. People were, you know, they were keeping the streets clean. So like it was clean enough you could basically eat off it, right? There was, like there was no homeless people exposed to the elements, worsening and metastasizing the plague into something worse, like what happened with the bubonic plague. Because like pigeons were just like crapping everywhere, and people wanted a solution. There happened to be a good king at the time, a good leader, or maybe even a tyrant that just turned around and said, "It's like, you know what? Let's just pay the homeless and get them to do it." And over time, that culture shifted. Don't disturb the pigeons; they'll fly away. We want them to stay here because they protect us from plague. And it's like, no, the smarter people will cotton on and say, it's like, don't disturb the pigeons because there's nothing left to clean. If there's nothing left to clean, there will be homeless people again. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm just trying to think of a more appropriate, like, real world analog. Knights and chivalry. A lot of the chivalric code comes from dealing with PTSD, if you'd believe that one. It's like, you know, honorable conduct. Don't have these outbursts in public. You keep your sword only as a last resort. You don't kill someone unnecessarily. You act with honor and distinction to the people, well, you try to anyway, to the people beneath you, and you answer to your liege lord. And that basically that was developed as a way to, it was earlier developed as a way to deal with PTSD, but now we view it in a bit of a lens of like, you know, this is what a hero acts like, if that makes sense.
So no more questions? All right, well, let's give a big round of applause for Samara Jade.
Thank you very much.